right, so I'm just gonna do a quick sound check. Can you all hear me okay? Am I good to go? All right, let's do this. Well, firstly, it's going to be a very difficult job to match what just transpired. But I will tell the audience this, that we will try our utmost. We'll try to keep this on point so that you can also go for your breaks and then attend the rest of the breakout sessions. What I also want to add is, before I ask my wonderful panelists to introduce themselves, we were supposed to have Oliveira on stage as well, but in light of the fact that there is an election upcoming, there's some restrictions around speaking on stage. But I do want to thank Oliveira for her support and giving us some really, really interesting questions to work with. So folks, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, but before I do that, I'll set the context a bit. I think it's fair to say, based on what we heard from Chris, that we are in a bit of a storm. And I promised myself I wouldn't swear on stage, but I'll say it nonetheless, a bit of a shitstorm. There, that didn't last for too long, but blame that on Chris Roberts. You have two options now. You can sink, or you can sail and figure this out. There's a lot happening, and Chris set the context for us extremely well. With the context that Chris set for us, I'm going to start with you, Sherry. If you can introduce yourself, and not just give us a challenge, but also an opportunity that you see going forward into 2025 and beyond.
Okay. Hi, Sherry Rumbold. Some of you know me. I've been in the industry for almost 35 years now, so I'm dating myself for sure. Spent a little bit of a stint in the Canadian Armed Forces for 21 years in the Army. Did a lot of really wonderful things with IMIT and cybersecurity, including forensics and some other cool stuff that I won't talk about. I am a federal government employee, and I've done a lot of wonderful things with technology over the years, and I've seen a lot of wonderful people and work with so many fabulous people as well. And thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here, CyberX. Challenges, I think that everybody needs to go back to the basics here, and we need to look at vulnerabilities more holistically, our processes and how we're doing business, because we're all moving so fast and so forward ahead. As Chris has mentioned, that I think that we're forgetting to look in the rearview mirror, and I think that that's something that's very important.
So rearview mirror, and something that we were talking about last night at the advisory dinner as well, is what we saw as yesterday's concerns have become today's threats, and you have to move a lot more agile. Speaking about agility and moving fast, my friend Bill, I think this is the 7th CISO forum. We met at the first one in 2019. Yep. We've all come many gray hairs away and a long time together. Bill, it's great to have you here. And if you can do the same, intro yourself, but also give us one opportunity that you see going into the future.
Sure. Bill Harmer, I've been in the industry for 30 plus years. I hate saying that number. And I've been doing cybersecurity since '97. I think I've seen a lot of changes. I saw the birth of the internet. I've seen the birth of mobile. I've seen the birth of SaaS. I've been doing startups the whole time, so I've been on the front of that. We're at an inflection point again. We're at this point where AI and quantum, when the quantum computers start running the AI, we're in for a world. But we have an opportunity now to almost reset and start and bring this forward properly. Chris said it, question it. Don't do it if you don't need it. Find ways to make meaningful change in how we've done it. Don't just grab it, roll it out, and try to backfill the security, because we have seen that. It doesn't work, right? We are currently trying to backfill the security on SaaS, currently trying to backfill the security on everything that we've rolled out. So I would say take an opportunity now and put in one meaningful change before you roll something out.
Okay. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, and that's your mantra going into 2025 and beyond. Security is a mindset, and it never sleeps, and I often wonder, Priya, that you're that one person who always responds, always on point. Wonder if you ever sleep. What are some of the challenges and opportunities that you see going into 2025? And then we'll go to the 5 topics we had discussed. Priya?
Yeah, sure. So just introducing myself, I'm Priya Servani. I'm the Vice President Business Information Security Officer at Canada Life now. have been in the industry for a while now, saw the turn of the century in that stage across various industries and various sectors in the space. But I think security is what we all love, which is why we are here, and that's exactly what I say for myself. Now, in terms of the opportunities, like you mentioned, I'm, like what Chris said this time, it's technology is not the problem. Human is the problem in a lot of cases, especially when we see it in the corporate sector. So I think from my perspective, 2025 and beyond, we'll continue to see more threats. We were talking ransomware, we talk AI, we'll talk quantum coming in, and then there'll be more, obviously. So not that they are our biggest challenges, but really the biggest challenge in some ways also the closing the gap between how the attackers operate and then how our corporate sector or our defense teams operate, right? So we all know cyber criminals are very organized, relentless. They just have to get right once. For us in the corporate sector, decisions are being made by multiple people at almost daily basis. So whether they click a link or whether you're putting the right security controls in what you develop, or approving funds for implementing security controls. So like lots of people are involved in this, and I think a big opportunity there for us really as we look at in the corporate sector is to sort of take that cohesive approach and embed security into the basic fabric of the company, so that everything we do and think, the mindset that you mentioned, it's that mindset of security first. It's there by design and by the virtue of what it is versus somebody telling you or somebody following it up, and not just remaining a security team's job, but everybody's responsibility, right? So I think, again, to the points that we raised, we're at that inflection point, and it's important that we first reset that mindset and culture before we embark onto some of these major challenges that will continue, as I said.
Sounds good. And I think this is a point we hear very often is cyber criminals may be unemployed, but they're not unpaid. And that delta of unemployed to unpaid is also shifting. For those of you that do any dark web classified scans, you will know job offers that currently sit for cyber criminals, but that's a separate subject. Now, to make this engaging as much as possible, I cannot see too much far into the audience, but decently enough. If you have a particular question, if you have a particular topic you want us to cover, sorry, I'm going to throw us in for a spin. Just shout it out. I have zero issues with that. If there's something pressing, just raise your hand and say it, and we will work with it.
You're so lucky I'm not in the audience.
I know. Well, you had your opportunity to put those questions in the document, but you only looked at the document this morning. So that's on you, buddy. So yeah, if anybody has one, just feel free, raise your hand. If I don't see you, just interrupt me and do it. We've got 32 minutes, and I will take your questions as they come up at any point of time. So I don't see any yet. Hopefully our conversation will trigger a few. So Priya, I want to start with you because you brought up the F word, finance and monies. So I have to ask you, when you look at attacks as they're transpiring over the last 6 months and what it looks forward going into 2025 and beyond, you mentioned something in our backdoor discussions where you said CISOs now are realizing, or not realizing, but are dealing with attacks where the focus is not just encrypting your data and locking you out. It is complete devastation, complete destruction, complete bulldozing. To piggyback on what Chris Roberts says, it's cyber warfare, and we're weaved into that. From a financial perspective, how is that changing your planning as you're looking into the future?
Yes, I mean, to your point, right, with all of this changing, and then the finance still, the fundamental part that we all at least feel the most in the corporate sector is your funds are still limited. At one side, security is important, but equally important for the business is to advance its goals and to earn more profit for the stakeholders and for everybody around us while doing the right things, right? So the key part, I think, for us is funds are limited and you still need to invest them in the right place, which is why, again, going back to some of the points we raised earlier is ensuring that it's all integrated properly. Do it once, do it right, like we again had Chris talk about, so that you are not wasting your funds and your time and effort in the same thing multiple times, which is where, again, shift left to security more by design. If you think of it more proactively, research has shown that it is 2 to 3 times faster and better and more cost-effective if it's thought early on, right? So I think really from all of our perspective, when it comes to how do you sort of manage these finances, it's secure by design, think security before, risk-based. We cannot, and I think as we heard Chris say too, we cannot keep up pace with everything that's happening out there. Corporations cannot. So the important thing is, where do you invest your dollars, where you get the biggest bang for that buck? So risk assessing it and making sure you focus in the right areas is, again, a big part of that journey. And then, preparing yourself for the worst as well. So when it comes to finance, specifically from an organizational standpoint, cyber insurance is an important part. While at this stage, we as well see that it's no more just the financial safety net, it's also really setting some kinds of security strategy now for the world, right? With underwriting getting tightened and premiums getting more expensive. So really all of these things together can actually put us onto a path where you still manage your dollars well and still bring security to a level that we all in this room, I'm sure, aspire to as security professionals.
So I'll just take that and work with it just a bit. And again, one other comment, if you do have me on WhatsApp or Twitter or LinkedIn, you can send me questions. I'll hear the buzz and I will take it. But Bill, I did do something with some of the feedback that we had in our session where we planned for this talk, is I actually socialized some of these questions with some up-and-coming leaders in the world of security. And one question from financing that came up was, going into the future, now Priya said, do it once, do it well. And I see some of my teammates here as well. I see Nasseen in the crowd as well, who heads up my IT division. One of the things that we look at is POCing and doing a proof of concept. Once upon a time, and again, I beg to be forgiven if this is a wrong assumption, we had a little bit of luxury of time, just a bit, where you could run these POCs. Now, you also take what Chris Roberts says, which is don't just go and buy the next shiny thing. How does that testing process and that show of value from tooling change as we go forward?
That's a really key word you use there, value. So don't do POCs. Proof of concepts are a waste of time. Proof of value is what you want to be doing. I think you can, if you're looking at the new shiny tool, you're even looking at a change in process. As CISOs, historically, we didn't always do this, but we should be doing it now, and it's to the financing point. Understand how you make money at your business, right? What can you afford to lose, right? What happens where you no longer make money or it becomes impactful to your business? Because those conversations that you'll have with those board members will no longer be about the CVEs, the servers, the vulnerabilities, the MITRE attack, or whatever. It will be about, I am going to reduce the risk to a $50 million business by 3% by investing $180,000, and they'll start to understand the math in that. When you look at those proof of value, you are looking at what does this tool, process, person, could be somebody that you're hiring, what do they do, what do they bring to your organization that protects how you make money, how you bring your value to your company, and is it worth what you're investing, right? Chris said it, and I've said it before, we don't have a tools problem. We have an execution problem. Even the tools that we do buy, we don't use fully. We usually hit 60, 70% of what the tool can do, and then we add on something else. So I think go back to basics, roll things back, start to look at where you're getting the value out of what you have, and how do you do a proof of value for a new thing.
We normally say people, process, technology. You are changing that into people, process, execution, and then technology.
Yep.
Very interesting way to go about this, and I'll take from what you've said, because this is a discussion we've had with regards to lots of tools, lots of processes, but now there's a new landscape around risk. It's not just third-party risk. With what we also saw for the sheet that Chris brought up on stage, there's now the evolution of fourth-party risk as well. Going into the future with so much development happening in different spaces, not knowing where our data is being stored, or better yet, not knowing where so many models are trained from. How does the risk landscape change from your perspective going into the future?
Well, I mean, I think that now every single time we go out and we look for a product or we want to sort of have a solution to a problem that we have, whether it's technology or processes or anything like that, I think that we're sort of having that trust that the product and the security of that product is going to be sound enough. But I think, again, to what a lot of people have said is that we don't ask the right questions. And oftentimes when we go to RFP or we're looking at a proof of concept or whatever, maybe sometimes we don't have the right people in the room even asking the right questions from a technical perspective and understanding what that risk is. And oftentimes, too, like we have to think about data storage, that personal PII data, and where is it, and how sovereign is it, and then also what happens if we actually have a breach or something, and can we get that information back, or are we at a loss? And oftentimes, too, these memorandums of understanding, the policies and stuff that we put down for a third party, sometimes fourth party, we figure this out. There's also integration of tooling from, third parties, fourth parties into another provider or solution that you have. And if something is wrong with that third or fourth party product, it could potentially, sort of cross over into whatever else you have. So, I mean, you might have a risk, and I call it an inherent risk of something happening, your service going down, or some sort of crucial situation that are happening, whether it's an outage or a breach as a result of something that's happened way down the line. And then you actually got to do an investigation to try to figure out where the culprit is. And we don't even know the connections between all of the different parties that are providing a certain service. And I think that that's something that's always been a little challenging. And I think when you think about the risk of that and how you're supposed to mitigate that, when you're in the line of fire, you don't have time to go back.
You remember Log4j?
Yeah, exactly.
The questions that came from Log4j, and then you went to your vendors, and the vendors went, "Oh, I don't know," and they had to ask their vendors and their vendors.
Exactly. So, and two, it's a little bit of a, pointing finger game sometimes. And I find that that's a little bit challenging, especially when you're in the 11th hour and you actually want to find something out quickly. So having said all that, having that idea when you're actually implementing a solution, implementing some sort of technology or whatever into your business, understand all of the connections of that. So, if I see we were looking at the vendor thing that Chris had put up there. If you actually do those connections, how are you mapping that into your organization? How are you actually understanding the interconnections? And I'm not going to name companies or whatever, but there are times when there's a problem, configuration or otherwise, and then all of a sudden we have company A that's affecting company B. Company B we're relying on for probably a majority of our service. And then that company is affected, but then they're saying, oh, well, it's this guy over here. But nonetheless, we still have outages. So, it doesn't really matter. It's like working together as a group and as a team to actually make sure that these things are mitigated in a very, very quick fashion. And I think that we're not good at that yet.
Fair enough. So if I have to take this looking forward in 2025, I think if I take the two of you and what you're saying is you have to show proof of value. Yeah. You have to really do that preemptively. And then from your side it really isn't what you see is what you get with a lot of the tools. It's what you see is not often what you do not get, or what you get is not what you see. It's a very difficult moment to be assessing what tools to bring into your environment. With that said, I got a question. So someone who followed the social engineering trick right at the front, Gabriel, CTO at Gatherly, sent me a question, which I'm going to open up to you, Bill, and then we'll go into something else that came in also, whoever tweeted at me on the quantum piece, and a very specific question. I'll say the question verbatim as I got it. If I remember it correctly, please correct me if I don't. What's one security issue that folks in the boardroom are not paying attention to right now, but should?
One security issue that folks in the boardroom are not paying attention to. the people.
That's what I was going to say.
I get soapboxy and preachy about this shit sometimes. We in the industry are not doing the basics. We're not doing the hard work. We're doing the fun work. And if you do the hard work, the documenting everything, I mean you dig into if you put an OS in, do you know every service running on it? Do you know every library included, where it came from, which repo, who last updated? That's where we need to be, because that is where the threats come from. The threat actors are not coming head on at us. And what we're doing is we're pulling back on the people and we're relying on the technology more. And again, I will say it, we do not have a tools problem, we have an execution problem. And I think that it's easy when budget cuts come to cut to people. The fully loaded FTE costs are, and I think in the boardroom, we need to have those conversations about are we executing correctly? Do we have the right human resources to execute? And do not rely on AI to execute yet. But we're going to get to that because the adversaries are using it. We're going to have to, and it is the future. We'll talk about that. But I think that is the piece that they're more concerned right now with the technology and the vulnerabilities and the headlines, not the people.
Okay. So we'll take that, and we've got about 8 to 9 more minutes. I'll take the 2 other topics that we're supposed to cover. So Priya, looking forward, one of the things that we've brought up, and we'll come to AI, is, yes, we've been hearing for a while about quantum-based attacks. But there was a differentiation that you brought up that if you can quickly tell the audience about, do we need to be preparing from a perspective of complete quantum resistance, although from an encryption standpoint, we don't have that at this point? How do you look at the future around encryption and quantum, and how do you prepare now for it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point because we've been talking about quantum fighting for the last 10 years, at least how I think, and even more. And at some stage, as we were talking at the time, it felt like it's way too distant from us. And even today, there is that perception that it's a little too far, right? But in the last couple of years, we've seen actually a lot of momentum in that space. We saw NIST approving or NIST finalizing 3 standards related to the post-quantum computing standards there from algorithm standpoint. We have seen the US government has actually mandated all their federal agencies to be quantum ready by 2035, so which is not too far. So clearly the risk horizon is shortening. All our cloud service providers and others have already started that journey. So in my mind, it's not something that's coming tomorrow. Clearly, we still have a lot of things that are like a top of our mind from what we are seeing, but it's not too far either. And considering its cryptography, it's actually going to take, even from an internal perspective, if you look at it from how we deploy it, it's a 5 to 10 year program, if one was to look for it to. So time is limited, while we might think that it's too far, right? And therefore, I think it's important that while the technology and while the standards are maturing, we might not have everything ready today, but internally start the planning for it now. Start shifting to think about it. It's more like a strategic shift that we would do. It's not an all or nothing decision, but starting to think about it. And what does that mean? I think in the current scenario, let's just look at our dependencies on the cryptography internally. So where is it that we're using encryption? How is it that we're using it? What would it take to assess? Now, again, do a risk assessment, because this is not happening tomorrow. It might be 5 years, 7 years later, as Gartner predicts, between 29 to 2030, 33 is where it'll kind of pick the right steam there. So if some systems are already going to be retired, don't worry about that. Some data might not be relevant after 5 years. It doesn't have as long a shelf life. Don't worry about it. But what matters, start thinking about it and saying, what would you do about it, right? And start piloting. I think internally, start looking at what can we do as more a hybrid with the algorithms coming in from the post-quantum era to what we use traditionally today, and then continue to evolve. And like I mentioned, some of these cloud partners, whether it's Microsoft, Google, even AWS, have all started to take that leap. And I think we can partner with them to understand how and what they are doing and how can we sort of speed up or plan our journey in that direction. So it's not to do tomorrow, but to have a proper 3 to 5 year plan in terms of what we're going to achieve within that cycle. So I think it's like I said, that it has to be on the top of our mind, maybe not for action right away, but definitely for planning.
I think, yeah, one thing I will say that we need to do now with quantum is sort and classify our data and begin encrypting today.
Right, yeah.
Your long tail data, the data that doesn't change, the data that is important to the future, because the hack now, the harvest now, decrypt later effort is massive.
Yeah, right.
It is massive. So if you've got databases that are still using older encryption, that's still good, still meets your contracts, but is not quantum safe, change it. Start upgrading that now. And to your point, this will be bigger than Y2K because this affects everybody. It's not just the people with the old mainframes. So when you look at your architecture, that will take years to figure out. If you're using like a man-in-the-middle style security tool, a Zscaler, a Paolo, a Netscope, they don't work post-quantum encryption, right? When you go to a quantum encryption, a quantum-proof encryption, they don't work. So what is the future plan of that, and how are you going to deal with it? Check with your vendors, see what their plans are, and then start making your plans as well. Because U.S. government says 10 years, Gartner says 7. I figure they're both shorting it. I'm figuring this is closer to 5.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Okay. So with that said, we have got about 4 minutes left. Sherry, question for you, which I knew was going to come to your plate again, is the one on identity now. And based on what you've seen right now, in terms of authentication of users, there's that friction that remains, user experience versus security. But given all the changes from a tech perspective, where do you see identity going, especially this whole push around passwordless, going into the next few years?
Well, I mean, we've got to get rid of some of our legacy systems first, right? So, I mean, we got to look at our assets, and I'm sorry, we got to go back to that conversation over and over again. I mean, we do, some people are like, having this argument for decentralized identity and sort of data storage and all that stuff. But I mean, we still have this huge problem of unique ID. Unique identity. And I mean, we have deduplication of stuff everywhere. And I mean, who are people who we think they are? And we have a lot of human error, manual, intervention in terms of inputting data for users and all that. So across the globe, across all of our systems, there are, even systems that are integrated or not integrated, the data is not always accurate. So, I mean, I really want to encourage the accuracy of identification and making sure that, we have true identity, because I think that that's going to help us in the long run. Right now, I mean, we probably have about 5 different versions of my name out there somewhere, because people always put a D at the end in my name and all this other stuff. And I know that if we were actually going to go look for some of that, and even in systems and large corporations or companies where you have lots of SaaS solutions, a lot of, solutions that are not necessarily single sign-on or whatever, there is a bunch of data there that needs to be sort of looked at in terms of, I hate to say it, but almost like centralization, so that you can decentralize. And and that kind of feels like it might get you a winning chance, because I think that we have too much out there that is just erroneous, inaccurate, and I think that when we come to the time of trying to figure out our proper identification, making sure that we're securing that data, because we're not, we're going to be challenged.
With that, we'll come to a conclusion. We have about 90 seconds left, and I want to stay true to time so that folks can get a break and then go to their breakouts very quickly. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I have to do it. You signed up for this, so here you are. Priya, is there a book or an author that you would recommend folks to read as they're planning going forward?
With respect to security?
Or leadership in general?
Yeah, I mean, leadership in general, I like to follow Adam Grant.
Yep.
So, yeah, I would just, it kind of takes care of everything from how humans approach each other, relationships, psychology, and then, of course, something that we can translate to security too. So,
Okay.
yeah,
We'll
quite
take
a few
that.
collections there that I follow.
Take that. Captain Bill?
Any sci-fi, go read something that is utterly outrageous because it is going to happen.
Fair enough. Sherry?
Oh, me, I'm all about self-help books. So, I mean, you know, I think that psychology is a huge thing in cybersecurity, and I always look at the human, you know, and the human effort and how we actually can improve ourselves, honestly.
Fantastic. On my side, I think it'll be, I forget the author because that tells you how well I read the book. But there's a book that I picked up called If It's Smart, It's Vulnerable. And I thought that was pretty smart for a title. So I picked it up, but I haven't read it yet. But consider doing that. Anyways, with that said, on behalf of myself, all the way from the exotic city of Oshawa, on behalf of Priya, who comes to you from Dubai, the land of have-yachts and have-nots, on behalf of Bill from Tariff Town, the United States, and on behalf of Sherry, also from the exotic city of Victoria, thank you all. I will remind you that breakout sessions happen on the 4th floor. You can go via the elevators, or if you want to challenge yourself, you can go up the stairs, but I guarantee you're going to get lost. Give it a shot. It's an adventure. Thank you all very much. I appreciate all of your time. And once again, a shout out to Chris Roberts, shout out to all of the volunteers, and a shout out to everybody that's here. Thank you.